All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking at this hour on WION, where after a week of controversy, the world's biggest tennis star, Novak Djokovic, is challenging the Australian government's decision to first grant him a clearance and then to revoke his visa and put him in a detention centre as soon as he landed in Melbourne. The hearing of this case is underway, so here's a quick look at the latest updates. The Novak Djokovic's lawyers are arguing in the court in Melbourne that the tennis star had entered into Australia after he had received an exemption from the state of Victoria and also Tennis Australia. In fact, the player had been granted exemption by two separate medical panels, which looked at his case without being aware that this was the case of Novak Djokovic, and they granted him clearance purely on the merit of the case. Now, the judge who's hearing the challenge has also raised several concerns about how the Serbian was being treated by the Australian border officials on his arrival. The judge noted the exemptions and has asked as to what more Djokovic could have done. Remember, the player has been held, believe it or not, at an immigration detention facility since he was dramatically denied entry into the country on Wednesday as soon as he landed at the airport in Melbourne. His visa was revoked. He was taken to an immigration detention centre where there have been past outbreaks of COVID-19 infections and also a recent fire. Now, Novak Djokovic has argued that he qualifies for a medical exemption from Australia's requirement that all visitors should be double vaccinated. But Australia has also given people saying that in case there is a necessity for an exemption, then they can apply for it and come into Australia once they get this needed clearance. Meanwhile, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who initially had said that his hands were off from the case of Novak Djokovic, has now doubled down on his government's decision, and he's done this largely after social media outrage, where people were demanding as to why the Australian law was being inconsistent in its application when it came to star tennis players.
Well, the matter is before the court, so I'm not going to be making any comment on the matter before the court and in relation to any other action the government may undertake. I mean, that's purely a matter before the courts at the moment. But in relation to the government, our government, the federal government's advice to Tennis Australia, that was set out very clearly in November. As I read the extract from this very podium, it could not have been more clear.
Now, on the other hand, the Australian Open chief, Kref Tilley, has blamed the conflicting and the fast-changing directives for the confusion surrounding Novak Djokovic's case.
Well, we're not going to lay the blame on anyone. All I can say that primarily because there's much conflict in information, much contradictory information the whole time. There's every single week we were talking to Home Affairs, we were talking to all parts of government to ensure that, one, we were doing the right thing and we were on the right process with one of these exemptions, but knowing also that everyone coming in had to be vaccinated, and we were at that point. So the conflicting information and the contradictory information that you receive is because of the changing environment. We are in a very challenging environment for everyone that's been involved in this process.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.